I'm Marwan Tarazi from Birzeit University. I'd like to introduce you to Schools.21, our new initiative for transforming schools in Palestine into model 21st century schools. It is an educational redevelopment program with emphasis on developing a motivating learning environment with the ultimate goal of preparing Palestinian school graduates so they can meet the challenges of today and tomorrow, take advantage of opportunities to improve their lives and community. Schools.21 is designed with replicability in mind. It is a model that would first be implemented in a few schools here in Palestine and then scaled locally in the Arab world. Let's take a look at the present situation we're facing in our region. The Arab world today is facing very serious challenges. We have very high unemployment rates, poverty, injustice, weak institutions, and weak economies. And the prospects for the future do not look good. By the year 2020, the Arab world is expected to create 100 million new jobs for its youth. And there are no indicators today that the Arab world is ready for this challenge. Frustration, especially amongst the youth, has been building up, leading to the social unrest and upheavals that we have been witnessing lately in the different Arab countries, or what is now being called the Arab Spring. The question is why? What is it that's keeping a region with so much history, so much culture, to trail so behind in the rank of nations, in economic and social development? Now, there are a number of interlinked factors that have contributed to this breakdown. But the most obvious ingredient in each of these problems has to be a failing educational system. So how is the educational system failing? Let's take Palestine as an example typical of the Arab world. The failure there is happening both in the quality of education and its relevance. What I mean here by failure in quality is easy to demonstrate. Let's take the Tawjihi examination, for example. The Tawjihi is the 12th grade matriculation examination every 12th grade student has to take in Palestine in order to graduate high school. And what are the results? Well, the failure rate is currently at 50%. Just imagine, half the student population is failing. So the system itself is failing at such an incredibly high rate in delivering its own standard of education that is supposed to prepare graduates to get employed and meet the challenges of the adult stages of their lives. Let's take another indicator, TIMSS. TIMSS stands for Trends in International Mathematics and Science Study Exam. And in contrast to Tawjihi, it represents an international standard of performance for school students in which over 55 countries, including many Arab countries, participate every 4 years. The table you see shows each country's ranking in descending order for the 2003 TIMSS survey. The row highlighted in blue is the international average. Palestine and most Arab countries are found at the bottom of the table, a humbling measure of where Arab educational systems stand in comparison with the rest of the world. Moreover, the scores for Palestine are actually falling when you compare the most recent TIMSS with the ones just before it. Unlike local and national exams such as Tawjihi, TIMSS does not only test knowledge areas. It also provides benchmarks for skills such as higher order analysis and problem solving. And in this domain, Arab students' standing is close to nil. For example, Palestine consistently obtains a score of 0%, representing the percentage of students who pass the advanced mathematics benchmark, which measure this high-order skills. The best Arab score in this category is 1%. Other international exams, like PISA, provide very similar results. And with this in mind, we shift our look at how education is failing to the realm of relevance, meaning how is the education students receiving is relevant to the demands placed on them by the job market and by 21st century life in general. With this new lens of relevance value, let's actually go back to the Tawjihi results. We said 50% fail the exam, but what are the prospects for those 50% who do pass? Not so great, because a large number of those graduates can actually be described as unemployable. Their education was that inadequate. Unfortunately, Relevance is a measure that most decision and policy makers, development agencies, funding organizations, and the public at large seem to be oblivious about. The focus of the efforts are all on how to get better results, better quality out of the ancient fortress of education, such as the tawjihi. This lack of relevance is a real catastrophe, because the world in which we live in today is dynamic, unstable, even to the extreme. It's more competitive and fast-paced than ever. It's also teeming with new opportunities and ways of working and living. Yet, our educational system are almost the reverse: ancient, static, and incapable of adapting to all this change. And it's not an exaggeration to say that they are ancient, because our educational systems are really still based on the industrial model developed in the 19th and early 20th century. In that era, economies and industries needed people that knew how to do basic arithmetic, read instructions, memorize, and carry out repetitive work. These were the skills the majority of people, apart from the higher class of professionals and managers, got out of their schooling. But in our time, students are expected to graduate possessing far more sophisticated skills, comparable with our more sophisticated economies and lives. So how can we expect the young Arab generation to solve the problems of tomorrow when they are studying the curriculum of the Industrial Revolution and using the methodology of the Middle Ages? Education policymakers are aware that the system is failing, yet their own efforts and projects and plans to fix it are also failing. Why? For one thing, our leadership and decision makers seem incapable of setting aside entrenched beliefs about education, about confronting reality. In some cases, they refuse to relinquish their dominance or jeopardize their personal interests. Whatever the reason, the culture surrounding our existing educational system is deeply calcified. More importantly, education reform efforts are failing because there are false assumptions about what is wrong in education and what matters in education. Our leaders assume that the system is essentially sound and that it needs only incremental upgrades here and there. You rarely hear the admission that the system is fundamentally obsolete. We all know that false assumptions lead to a false diagnosis, and this is what we have: a misdiagnosis of the problem in education and futile measures taken to try to solve it. And those measures are often destructive in that they hold up the possibility of meaningful reform. The situation is analogous to a rundown bus trying to deliver school children to their desired destination. This bus, belonging to the previous century and designed to ride on the paved roads in some totally different environment and context, is having a hard time moving on the rocky terrain we have over here. It's breaking down frequently, and it's not getting students to where they need to be. Everyone can see the problem, everyone is frustrated by it, and everyone wants to fix it. So what's done about it? Some try to change the tires, but that doesn't change things much. New glossy maps are produced to guide the bus, but it's still a very bumpy ride. The driver receives extensive training, marginal change. Then computers are installed on passenger seats. Then a whole slew of RFPs and proposals are produced in an attempt to get funding to keep the bus rolling. But despite all these efforts, the bus does not move any faster, and its passengers remain stranded and lost in the middle of nowhere. So it has to get to a point where we need to say to these people, stop. What you are doing is not going to help the bus do its job of transporting the desired number of students in the desired period of time to the desired destination. What is needed is a different kind of vehicle altogether. What is needed is a systemic redesign. We will only make progress when we realize the primary problem in our education system is not one of performance, but one of fundamental design. Let's look at one particular design flaw: how the system deals with its students. Students today are more diverse than ever. Take a look at any classroom and you'll see so many different personalities, different localities, different social backgrounds and environments. You'll discover that students of today have an unprecedented level of exposure and access to knowledge, technology, media, communication tools. They are more savvy than you and I were at their age. And you will also find that each student learns at a particular pace and in a particular way. Each has his or her unique set of shortcomings, talents, and motivations. Now imagine you are the teacher in that classroom, faced with all those diverse students. The way it is designed, the system expects you to treat them all the same way. It hands you a homogeneous curriculum, which you're supposed to teach to all students at the same time. It imposes on you its own criteria for measuring performance, the uniform yardstick of evaluation tests and often trivial performance indicators. How can you get all your students to learn in this straight-jacketed situation? Because a lot of them will fall behind slightly. How can you divide the limited time you have to cover the overwhelming, voluminous curriculum and give that group the special attention it needs? How can you expect to retain everyone's attention and motivation when each is inspired and motivated differently? It simply won't work. This homogenized system of education denies the heterogeneous reality of human nature. It is no wonder why the system is seriously failing. We're constantly seeing people involved in education reform and development alluding to skills such as the 21st century skills. So we get wary, we get suspicious when we hear education consultants, development agencies, decision and policymakers deploying this 21st century skills jargon without reflecting on how to successfully make a leap between the words and the realization. What we see happening instead are interventions where we see these concepts are thrown into rigid, boxed-up educational systems, and then they're expected to make an impact. Needless to say, education reform does not work that way. And probably no one can demonstrate this better than Waddah. Waddah is a typical Palestinian teacher. He teaches science in a conventional way, basing his lecturing and examples on the science textbook every student in his class has. One day, Waddah qualifies to enroll into a state-of-the-art teacher training program where he learns all about the new learning concepts and techniques, such as personalized learning, use of role-playing, ways to empower and motivate students, the works. Now, Waddah is a fast learner and an enthusiastic teacher, and at the end of his training, he's all psyched up to try out the new fantastic new things he learned. But he quickly realizes that he still has to work with the same fixed curriculum. Students have to pass standardized exams where they are tested on the ability to replicate the information they found in the textbooks. Waddah has a supervisor who checks to see if he has finished the material on time. Waddah has no means of supporting the use of new concepts and learning paradigms that he got trained in. In short, Waddah's hands are tied. The constraints of the existing system leave him disempowered, and he can only revert to his old ways of teaching.